Welcome, kings and queens, to another episode of Unapologetic, your number one podcast. Welcome back, everybody. It is yours truly, Melly Mel, aka Mr. Unapologetic. We have another special guest. Man, it's been a ride. I can honestly say I've been privileged to have so many great minds on one show, one platform, and we're just going to continue to grow like we've been doing. But today, our special guest is another, I don't even know how to put it in words, man. He has done so many big things as far as creation. He has been a leader. So we're just going to let him tell it because there's certain details that I got to find out, and I know you guys want to know as well. Can you please give a round of applause to Mr. Ryan Vaughn, ladies and gentlemen? How you doing?
Thank you, Mel. I'm so good. Thanks for having me on. I'm excited to be here.
Oh man, thank you for being here. I know it's been a little minute. We've been, hit and missing for quite some time.
Took a little bit, yeah.
But I'm really happy about this because we have a mutual friend, Dr. Erickson. When I first met him, he brought you up like on our second time having a conversation. And I'm like, man, how he was describing you, I was like, is he real? Like, is a person really like he just seemed too nice to be this big time person. So but when I finally met you, talked to you, and it was like, oh, okay. So I really got to have him on the show. And it's amazing to me how young you are and the accomplishment, excuse me, of the corporations or businesses that you have created in the last 15 years. And when I was doing my research, I read that you were the founder and CEO of 3 different companies. Is that true?
Well, 4 now, yep.
Oh man, let's so like, can you take me through your mindset of in the beginning of, man, what made you, become this mogul? Like what? Because that takes drive, man. That takes a lot of passion.
Oh man, yeah. Yeah, I think I'm happy to. And I'm happy to give you just a little bit of background on myself as well. So yeah, I started a serial entrepreneur. I've been a CEO now of 4 different companies. The first 2 were progressively larger learning experiences, which is to say they failed at larger scales.
Right.
And then the third one was a company that scaled and eventually exited, and that was a company called Varsity News Network. And we thought of that as like ESPN.com for high
Yeah.
schools.
Yeah.
So, and then most recently, I started an executive coaching firm called Inside Out Leadership. And we are a firm that is entirely built by entrepreneurs, and we coach entrepreneurs. So it's a pretty unique take on what executive coaching can do for entrepreneurs, and we're excited about that.
Congratulations.
Yeah, thank you. And it's interesting. You mentioned this. You're surprised at how nice I was, considering the different things that I've done. And I think that one topic we should touch on here is that it's possible to be nice and successful.
Right.
So hopefully that's sort of the thread throughout our conversation. So you asked me what gave me the drive to do all this stuff. I
Yeah,
think
man.
that kind of cuts to the heart of things for me. I mean, the honest answer is a self-concept that wasn't very good for a long time.
Okay.
So when I was growing up, from as early as I can remember, I had a pretty deep-seated belief that I wasn't good enough. And I've done enough sort of therapy and inner work at this point to have a good sense of where that came from, various parts of my upbringing and stuff like that. But like so many entrepreneurs, I think this is actually a pretty common archetype for an entrepreneur. I looked around me and saw what society rewarded. I saw the way that people looked at leaders in this industry and leaders in this industry and the way that they admired them and everything else. And what I saw there was that, you know, in order to, like, the people that were successful in various fields were looked at the way that I felt like I wanted to be looked at. And for somebody that felt kind of in my core inadequate for a long time, I convinced myself that if I could just be successful enough, if I could just build a big enough thing, then I'd feel good.
Right.
Um,
Okay.
and and I did that. Well, I did that for, going on 20 years now, and I can say that it doesn't work like that.
Oh man. So when that epiphany happened, when that lesson was learned from you, how what changed within you?
um, it that was a pretty big transition point for me in my life. So when I was at VNN, I was there for about 10 years. And we went from, an idea that I had and
Right.
not even a PowerPoint. I had like a a poster board with some words on it is where I
Oh, okay.
started.
Yeah, yeah.
Um, and then that company recently exited for 55 million bucks, and it was a really, really, it was a good
Wow.
outcome. Not a life changing outcome for me personally, but a good outcome for a lot of people involved.
Right, right,
Um, and so 10 years in that seat, and 15 years overall in the sort of venture backed CEO seat. And I think in hindsight, I was chasing, external validation as a means of making myself feel good for a good 13 of those years. And for 13 of those years, it felt incredibly exhilarating, and like I'd never questioned it. It was, somebody would ask me, what's the meaning of life? I would have been like, well, it's to make this company successful. That's what I'm doing. That's why I'm here.
right, right.
Um, and probably a combination of things. One of them was definitely I had kids.
Mm,
And some of the I have two boys now, 5 and 7, and some of the sacrifices that were like intellectual at one point became real.
right.
So that definitely played a role. And then also, I think just I felt like I had been trying so hard to be the perfect CEO for so long.
Right.
And my vision of the perfect CEO had become so different from who I actually thought I was, that the delta
Wow.
between those two things became big.
Right.
Um,
So
and
you was
and that
almost like you was
eventually,
living, I'm sorry, but it's almost like you was living a two separate entities. It's, versions of yourself, should I say.
yeah, it was. I had to put on a show in order to be a CEO.
Right.
I had to, in hindsight, I'm not sure that I had to put on as much of a show as I did, but at the time, that's how I felt like I needed to do. You have to be immensely confident. You have to know the answers, all this stuff, right?
Right.
Um, and and eventually, all of that just sort of caught up to me, and I ended up leaving the company. And it was a more involved process than that, but
Right.
effectively, that's what happened. And I remember in the beginning of that, it started as a sabbatical. That was actually our friend Carl, Dr. Erickson. He was the one that suggested. He's like, "Have you ever done a sabbatical? Because those are fantastic." He's my Pied Piper of sabbaticals.
Right.
Uh,
Okay.
so that's how it started. And he said, and I remember telling my wife Laura that I was going to take some time off. I'm going to take a couple months.
Right.
And she was like, "That's nuts. You can't do that. Like, you just brought in a new CEO to help grow the next company. You can't like immediately leave after that." Da, 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 da. And all really logical reasons. And I remember telling her, I was like, I've been running my whole life, thinking that it's gonna, like, when I catch something, some specific thing, it's gonna make me feel okay.
Right.
And I've caught a lot of things, and still hasn't happened. And so it's hard for me to believe that the next thing I catch is really going to do that either. Um, and yet here I am still running my ass off. And so if I'm not running towards something that's valuable, the only thing I can think of is I must be running from something.
Ooh.
And if that's
Wow.
true, then I'm going to take some time, stop running, let it catch up, and see what happens. And so
Understood.
that 2 month sabbatical turned into a much longer, period of time away. And I was fortunate that I had the ability to do that at the time. But I think through a combination of a whole bunch of different things. I'm a longtime meditator. That played a big role. I studied under a Zen master, which was a really fun experience. Stayed at a
Oh wow,
monastery.
okay. That's
Um,
dope. Oh man.
got involved in all sorts of different modalities in terms of inner work. And when I left VNN, my first instinct was to start another company right away. So I'm Ryan, the guy who starts companies. That's who I am, right?
Right,
I
right,
gotta do the next thing.
right.
And I think the moment that all this changed for me was uh, uh, when I decided not to do that. When I decided not to recreate myself, and instead of being Ryan, the guy who's doing this, Ryan, the guy who's doing that, any of those things, I gave myself permission to just be Ryan. And when people are like, "Oh, what's next?" That's the question you get an
Yeah,
awful
yeah,
lot.
yeah, yeah.
And I just got really practiced at being like, I don't know. I'm working on this. I'm really excited about this. Working on that. Really excited about that. But I don't know. We'll see where it takes me.
Right.
Um, People were weird about that, man, and I
Right.
felt uncomfortable with that. But it's led me to super awesome and really interesting places. Now this executive coaching firm is all a result of that.
And that's like I don't know how to put it in words. So the emails that you sent me, I went over them, I read them, and man, one of the key points that I've read in one of the newsletters was it asked a question, but it asks a question like for yourself. And it was like, how do you want to be when you run a company as a CEO? And
Okay.
I'm like, man, like for me, as me being an entrepreneur and as a business owner, it made me put my phone down and really start thinking like I never really thought of that. Like how comfortable will I be running this huge entity and with all these people looking for me for guidance and opportunity and all types of other responsibilities that goes with this position. And I started thinking about how you must be felt, operating and running three big companies and for as long as you have. So I'm glad I'm glad I asked that question in the beginning because now I see what happened to you during this time. And plus you grew and you learned so much because Inside Out is huge. Like you've been really putting your all into it and it's great. And my next question is what was the next step after VNN? Because VNN I remember seeing VNN everywhere, man. That is the largest when it comes to high school sports and whatnot. So it's amazing what you have created previously, and then you're like thinking like, oh, I want to go bigger. So what was the next step after that?
Well, there was a part of me that wanted to go bigger. That was the part that was like, start the next company, get the next milestone, get the biggest, like
Right,
VNN didn't satisfy me, so I must not have gone big enough. I got to get
right,
that even bigger
wow.
thing. Um, and that was the model that I've been living through for my whole life, and that was the thing that I had to do a hell of a lot of work to let go of.
Right,
To let go of the idea that there is something big enough that I can accomplish that will make me feel the way, make me feel at peace, make me feel okay about myself. Um, and there's a lot of work that went into that, but I think the process for me, if you start, my experience, and when I work with founders, this is tends to be some type of the process that we go through as well. But
okay,
my experience is that we human beings want specific things out of life, and 9 times out of 10 they haven't explored why they want those things,
mm,
um, or where they learned to want those things.
right,
And as I started to look at that, I knew that I wanted to be successful. I knew that I wanted this, and I wanted to, all these things. But after having attained most of those things, I didn't actually, it's just one more thing, and now I want the next thing. So I started to ask myself, where did I learn to want to be successful?